Thank you, councillors, executive team, and also we have one member in the gallery here in the chambers. It gives me great pleasure to officially open our September ordinary meeting of council at 4:30. Now, for everybody, a reminder: this is a hybrid version because of the restrictions that have been put into place by the health orders in New South Wales. We're in a situation where we have some councillors who are able to attend here in the actual chambers, but also some councillors that need to be isolated to comply with the health orders, and they are joining us in via Zoom. So please, we can all be tolerant of this hybrid version. It's a little bit slower and a little bit frustrating, but I'm sure we'll get through it. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Kamilaroi people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, and pay my respects to elders both past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal community members who may be listening in. I'll now ask those members that are on Zoom, if you could please bow your head, and those in the chambers, if we could all be please upstanding for prayer. Eternal God, our loving Father, we come to thee this day in the name of Jesus Christ, who is the lover of our souls and the saviour of all mankind. May we feel his love and respond to it. May his spirit shine in lives that are darkened by worry, doubt or fear. Strengthen and guide those who are trying to do what is right. Make it plain to them. Make us more mindful of the needs of our fellow men and less absorbed in selfish concerns, that Christ may approve and bless what we do here this day. We ask these blessings in his name. Amen. Please be seated. We'll now read out the bereavements between the 26th of August and the 15th of September. And as an organisation, we mourn the loss of Stephen James Everly, Helen May Fenn, Brian Albert Hales, Freda Greer, Beverly Faith Lawler, Kevin William Wicks, Patricia Murray Walker, Wallace Paul Westerweller, Ian Robert George Wilson, Catherine Joan Lord, Kerry Lee Walsh, and Marion Jean Lamont. Councillors, councillor team and friends who are with us in the gallery, if I could please ask you to be upstanding for 1 minute of silence as we extend our respect to the families and friends of the deceased. Thank you. Please be seated. Now move on to apologies and those that are present. We have all elected members joining us in one way, shape or another for our September ordinary meeting, and our executive team also. We have all members, all present. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is confirmation of the minutes of our ordinary council meeting that was held on the 25th of August. And I'll now call on an elected member to please move that from quick. Thank you. Councillor Hook has moved, seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Hook, do you wish to speak to the motion, to move the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We'll have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against that motion. Councillor Moses, second on the motion, Mr. Speaker.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I'll put the motion on in favour.
Aye.
Against? So the motion carried. I'll now call for any declarations of interest in relation to the business paper before you. I'll call a second time for any declarations of interest. In the case there are no declarations, we'll move on. There are no community presentations. Councillors, I'd now like to bring to your attention a Merrill minute. For those on Zoom, have had a copy that's been emailed to you, and for those in the room, you have a copy before you. The Merrill minute relates to the Royal Flying Doctor Service Pfizer clinic that has been running for the last 3 days within the Gunnedah Shire. And councillors, I'd like to bring to your attention the fact that the actual number now that it's closed today of people that from not only Gunnedah but the wider region who have travelled to get a Pfizer vaccination, the number is 2,418. As you would read on my Merrill minute, I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who took advantage of the opportunity, and look forward to seeing our community and our wider region's vaccination numbers increasing. As we know, there are still 2 days left of the vaccination opportunity for Pfizer in the Shire, with Malali tomorrow and Kaluish on Friday. But my greatest appreciation is to the people and the organisations who have made these vaccination clinics possible. To the Federal CEO of the Royal Flying Doctor Service, Mr. Frank Quinlan, and to our Federal Member, the Honourable Mark Colton, who went into bat on behalf of their constituents and made the Pfizer vaccine available here in the Gunnedah Shire. It is great to have a federal representative who is so prepared to go that extra mile for our community. Also to the wonderful people of the Royal Flying Doctor Service who are hosting the clinics and for providing the professional services that our community has been so grateful to receive. Thanks must also go to Tamworth Aboriginal Medical Services and the Hunter New England Health who provided clinical staff to give the vaccinations. Also to Winanali for coming out in huge numbers to assist, and also who advocated very strongly alongside of the Gunnedah Shire Council to have this vaccine available and these clinics running. The SES who helped with traffic control, and our Gunnedah Shire team who all helped to make sure that things run very smoothly. And to the Rotarians whose members were there and were looking after all the people once they'd been vaccinated and were waiting 15 minutes with a smile, a story and a lollipop. It was greatly received. It was truly a community effort to run these 3 days. I am deeply proud of what this community has been able to achieve in these few days. We were amongst the first in the country to be able to offer the vaccine to young people from between the ages of 12 and 15, and have managed to win another fight against the pandemic and the threats against us and our people. So this is on the back of the great work that's already been happening in our community by our pharmacists and those hard-working GPs that have been giving out vaccinations of all different breeds now for many, many months in our community. So congratulations to Gunnedah. Being a Merrill minute, I don't need a seconder, but I would now put that motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare the motion carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to the General Manager's reports, starting with item 9.1, draft 2020-21 financial statements. And I'll call on Mr. Groth, who's joining us on Zoom, to give some detail to this recommendation before I call for a mover.
Good afternoon all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very pleased to present the financial statements acknowledging the work of Colin Green, Katie Manny and the team in finance in pulling this together during difficult times with COVID and the impacts. I guess the key thing is to identify that there's a $2.7 million surplus for council before capital grants and contributions, and if councils were to draw their attention to page 86, there's a a good summary of the key performance indicators for council, which are all very positive again this financial year. Pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Groff. I'll now call for a move. Thank you, Councillor Hook has moved the motion. Do I have a second? Councillor Fuller, thank you. Councillor Hook has moved the motion. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think once again, this council and through your leadership, Mr. Groff, has just shown how well this council has performed. In the past 3 years, they've been extremely difficult times, and each occasion has brought up extremely good results, results that nobody expected would actually occur. I think through the consolidated graphs, the statement of performance measures, it really highlights how well this council has done. We've started off in 2019 in a really good place. We've had the drought that really took effect last year, and it did knock us around. We've now had the tail end of the drought and COVID, which has knocked us around again. And yet, through your leadership and through the financial team, we've managed to achieve an absolutely outstanding result, I believe. And I'd like to thank you and your team, and also pass on my thanks to the thanks of this council to Colin Green and his financial department for actually putting this document together. Congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor Fuller, is a second to the motion. Do you wish to speak?
I'd just also like to pass on my congratulations like the Deputy Mayor. I think it's been an outstanding council and the contributions of the good team working together. Congratulations to all the staff and to everyone that has worked so hard, including all the councillors, sitting by and doing what we should do as a good council. So thank you, Mr. General Manager, and all of this staff. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, I'd now like to put the motion by show of hands. All in favour?
Right.
All that unanimously supported. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next item, and that is investments, and I'll hand back to Mr. Groff to detail the recommendation.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. The report details $73 million invested by council at the 31st of August 2021. Pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Groff. I'll now call for elected member to move that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Luke, seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Luke has moved the motion. Wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask Mr. Groff a question, if I may.
May.
Mr. Groff, can you explain broadly the quite nice trend that we've actually got with the council investments, average dollars invested, the little green bar being this financial year, and it's been at a low and has been creeping up over the last couple of years. Can you explain broadly the reason why we've got such a pleasing upward trend in the green bars, and before that the purple bars of the year before?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Luke. In terms of the average investment balance, as you say, it has crept up, particularly in this month. There has been, over the last 12 months, there's actually been a downward trend in the total invested from in the high 60s back to the 50s, and now we're back at 73 million. It's essentially a timing issue in terms of cash flows that sees us where we are. There hasn't been stark changes in our performance to give an uplift in cash. So it's basically, whilst the council's been performing strongly, it's essentially where we're at in terms of the income received in cash form to date, and the outgoing expenses not occurring at this stage. Councillors will be aware we do have considerable grant income for capital purposes, and we're yet to make some of those outgoing expenses.
I call for elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Moses is second to the motion. To speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case, I put the motion. All in favour by show of hand. Unanimously supported. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Groff, for your contribution. We'll now move on.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just at this stage, whilst we're in open council, in my reports, there is a late item that was circulated to councillors. if I could get a mover and a seconder to bring that onto the agenda to be considered in the closed section of council.
Thank you. It's moved by Councillor Hazel and seconded by Councillor Fuller. I'll put that motion on favour. By show of hands, unanimously supported. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda is the last item in closed. We'll now move on to item 10, which is Director of Corporate and Community Services reports, and I'll call on Mr. Foreman to detail his recommendations, starting with the first item, which is item 10.1, form of written returns of interest submitted under clause 4.21. Thank you, Mr. Foreman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This first report is to table the written returns of interest and note that all required returns have been received.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Calling on a councillor to move the motion. Thank you, Councillor Campbell, and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Thank you. Councillor Campbell has moved the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion? Councillor Fuller is the second to the motion. Wish to speak? In case, I put the motion by show of hands. All in favour? Unanimously supported. Thank you. And Mr. Foreman, item 10.2, outstanding resolution register.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The outstanding resolution register is presented for the information of councillors with questions directed to the relevant officers. The recommendation is that the report be received in notice.
Now call for elected member to move that the recommendation becomes the motion.
I'm happy to do so, to ask a couple of questions.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, and seconded by Councillor Moses. Councillor Hasler, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first question of 3 relates to 1606-2021. It refers to the potential car parking contribution. We're told that that's 10% completed to date, that motion which was carried. Do we have an expectation that there will be a report on this particular aspect? I recognise that the Libby's playground issues and issues relating to Wolseley Park may take longer, given that it's got to go out to public consultation. But this process, the aspect of it about the car parking, would seem to me to be something which could come to council prior to the others. Do we have any time frame in terms of that?
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, for the question. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll need to take that question on notice.
My next question, Mr. Chairman, relates to the 170221, the Basketball Association Licence Agreement. This whole process by getting an agreement has seen a litany of delays. Have we any idea how long this delay is likely to be?
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, for the question. And through you, Mr. Mayor, at this stage, staff and the Basketball Association have undertaken everything within our control. The matter is currently sitting with the Department of Crown Lands, and we're awaiting their response.
We have no idea how long that will be.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, for the further question. And through you, Mr. Mayor, if Councillor Hasler is able to control the Department of Crown Lands, I'm more than happy to take some advice or suggestions on how we might be able to give them a hurry up.
I'll work on it. The next one and final question relates to the 170321, the VPA related to Narrabri Coal. I note that there has been a letter since, but I thought I heard during the week that there was some suggestion that application wasn't going to proceed. Have we had any information to that effect? I may have misheard a comment on the news in reporting about.
Councillor Hasler, if I could have your attention, Councillor Hasler, there are councillors that are in this meeting that do have declarations of interest in relation to Whitehaven. I'd prefer that you took this question to the Director directly outside of a council meeting for further clarification, please.
Well, it wouldn't affect a declaration, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't think it's only about whether the application has been withdrawn or otherwise, but I'm happy to leave it then for the General Manager to report.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler. I'll now call for elected member if you would like to ask a further question or speak against the motion. Councillor Moses, the second of the motion, you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case, by a show of hands, please, councillors. All in favour? That unanimously supported. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. We'll now move on to item number 11, which is Director of Planning and Environmental Services reports. I'll hand to Mr. Johns to detail his press recommendation in relation to item 11.1, review of business partner program guidelines.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And through you, councillors, this report relates to some changes that are proposed to the business partner program guidelines, application form, and also the declaration of expenditure. The changes have been recommended at the request of the advisory group, who works very hard for this community in, sorting through lots of applications. Some of the changes you would have seen in the report include clarification around exactly what is permissible under the grant program. It also touches on the requirement for quotes to be provided, and there's also some generic changes to the application form.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. And now, thank you, Councillor Luke has moved that motion and seconded by Councillor Hook. Thank you. Councillor Luke has moved the motion. You wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would just like to reiterate those comments of the Director. It is and many of the councillors in the room who are actually also on the working group would actually already appreciate the difficulty in assessing these applications, and I think we're forever trying to tweak and get it a better process. So I would recommend these changes. Can't say they'll be the last of the changes over the years, but I would recommend to my fellow councillors to approve these changes.
Thank you, Councillor Luke. We'll have an elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against that motion. Councillor Hook is the second of the motion. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case, by show of hands. All in favour? Unanimously supported, therefore carried. Thank you. Moving on, item 11.2, Gunnedah Waste Management Leachate Modelling Study Review. I'll hand back to Mr. Johns.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And through you, councillors, as you would have read in this report seeks the allocation of an additional $10,000 from the domestic waste management restricted asset, and then placed towards the 21-22 capital works budget. And it's essentially to allow us to complete a leachate modelling study review as outlined in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Johns, and our call for elected member to move that recommendation. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Luke, seconded by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Luke has moved the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Our call for elected member who'd like to ask a question or speak against the motion. Councillor Fuller is a second of the motion. Wish to speak? Be the case, by show of hands. All in favour? Unanimously supported. Thank you. Moving right along. Item 11.3, draft Gunnedah local housing strategy. I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail that recommendation.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, this report seeks support from Council to place the draft Gunnedah Shire local housing strategy on public exhibition. This strategy has had great buy-in from our community at a number of workshops that we held, and it's also been workshopped with your good selves. Essentially, it outlines 5 directions, 15 strategies, and 35 actions around housing for our Shire into the future. And I'd like to just, commend the work of Blake O'Malley and his team, also Deborah Hilton, and the huge amount of work that's been done to get to this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. I'll now call for a move. Thank you, Councillor Hasler has moved that motion, seconded by Councillor Moses. Thank you. Councillor Hasler, do you wish to move? Do you wish to speak to the motion? Just move the motion.
Just to say that as one of the councillors that have pursued more affordable housing for our community, because what has been a perceived need for some time, I think it's appropriate this policy should go out for public consultation. Councillors have already had input and of course would be having further input once we receive that community response. So I welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Hazard. Do I have an elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak?
Yes, I would, Mr. Mayor. I actually would have liked to have moved something different to the officer's recommendation. Councillor Hasler's beat me to the party there. I had intended to move that we receive and note the draft and arrange a workshop prior to the next council meeting to discuss a path forward. I guess, to be blunt, I have some concerns that whilst I would agree with the director's comments around the effort and the work involved in the community consultation, it's effectively not what I was expecting to get out of a housing strategy, and I don't feel that I'm satisfied that putting this document as we currently have it out to the community is putting our best foot forward and achieving all that we wish. So I effectively intended to stall that and have a workshop with my fellow elected members and the directors and talk about what we could do or how we could change and advance this. For that very reason, I intend to vote against the motion and potentially, if it goes down, put a contrary one up.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Moses, as second to the motion, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've had 2 for and 1 against. I'll now call for any further questions or councillor who'd like to speak against the motion. Thank you, Councillor Hawke.
Look, there's been a lot of work done with this document. There's no doubt about that, and congratulations to everybody involved in doing that. I happen to have some sympathy for what Councillor O'Keefe is saying. I do believe there's more work that could be done with this document. I think, in my mind, it falls short of exactly where we possibly should be. The concern that I have is that if this document goes out to the public, like past history, there may be a little bit of tweaking to the document. The public generally don't get particularly involved in these sorts of documents, and what we see today is largely what we might get. And I feel that there's more we can investigate. There is no rush in bringing this document forward as far as I am concerned. I think time is on our side, and if we do have the opportunity, I know it puts more work back into the department, but I believe time is on our side, and I think we've got one opportunity to actually get this document a little better than it is today. There's some things that no point discussing here today, but there's some things that I'd like to see actually discussed and explored within council and within selected people in the community to see whether we can actually come up with a document which is a little firmer than it is today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawke. Councillors, I've had 2 speak for and 2 against this motion. Are there any further questions or comments before I put the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll take my right of reply if I may.
You may.
I would just say that I think councillors have had, certainly not a huge amount, but we've had opportunity already to have some input. And by it going out to public consultation, if there are similar views in the community, and I'm quite sure if you have some views of that sort, you may be able to encourage others to raise it anyway, and then we'll be looking at what contributions have been made in that consultation and rejigging the document at the end of the process. I think we've given it a reasonable amount of preliminary work, and I thank the staff for that. And I think we will have now, the community have the opportunity to have input, and if there are concerns, they will be raised and should be raised, and we can adjust it when the staff bring it back at the end of the consultation period.
Thank you, Councillor Hasler. So, councillors, I'm now going to put the motion. Show by show of hands, all in support of the motion. 1, 2, 3. And against? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the motion is defeated. Is there an alternate motion to be put forward?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may. I'll put forward my foreshadowed alternate motion, and I do apologise for Ms Markey that I've not emailed this. But point one, that council receive and note the draft report, or the draft strategy, I should say, and point two, that a workshop be arranged prior to the October council meeting to discuss a path forward.
I'll now call for a second to that motion. Thank you, Councillor Hook, has seconded the motion. Ms Markey, are you able to share your screen with the elected members and the General Manager on Zoom? Councillor O'Keefe, before I ask you to speak to your motion, are you able to see the screen, see the wording of your motion on the screen?
I am now, and yes, and provided I've not created a problem with the language of that's my intention. Yes, I'm happy with that wording.
Councillor Hook, can you confirm that you?
Sorry, can I change one thing, Ms Markey? In point two, the third last word, the, probably should be a. Should be a path forward.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Hook has seconded the motion. You agree with the wording as a seconder?
Yes, I do. I'm happy with that.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to your motion?
Look, just to reiterate a couple of points that came out loud and clear. A lot of effort goes into this, and that's not lost on myself or my fellow councillors. And I'm not moving this way lightly. I take a contrary opinion to Councillor Hasler for a variety of reasons. I don't actually think we as elected members have had the level of input yet that I certainly feel we require. Certainly some of the reasons behind that are with us as elected members, not with the staff, but bluntly, I think this needs more work. And I think we as an organisation and elected members need to spend some time together and really make sure we're achieving what we desire out of this strategy and we're all on the same page.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. And I now have elected member who'd like to speak against this motion or ask a further question. Councillor Luke.
Thanks very much. I'm wondering whether that the workshop that this motion discuss or has in its wording could also include workshops held with professionals working in the industry and potential developers, so that we actually have some viewpoints from them, unless the director can say that these viewpoints have been canvassed well by the draft strategy.
I'll refer to the Director of Infrastructure Services, for Planning and Environment to answer that. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, through you. Thanks, Councillor, for the question. We actually had a half-day workshop with industry in the very early stages of this development of this strategy. So their input has been received and has informed the development of this draft.
Do you see, if I can ask through you, Mr Mayor, of the Director, do you see value in a further workshop being held with those people at this stage as well too, rather than just at what has already been conducted?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Luke. I guess we could consult till the cows come home, Councillor Luke. Generally speaking, the way it would work is if Council endorsed it, then we would certainly engage with industry in the exhibition period. But I guess there's not much point going back to them until councillors are happy with a draft that we can put on exhibition.
Councillor Hook has seconded to the motion. You wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's all been said.
Are there any further questions, councillors, before I put the motion? In the case, I put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Declare that motion carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next item, which is item 11.4, street trading and footpath dining application fees. And I'll hand back to Mr. Johns to detail the recommendation.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, very basic report, but with some important potential implications. This report seeks council support to, again, waive street trading and footpath dining application fees for 21-22 financial year. And again, that's just about supporting the local businesses who are doing it up at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. I now call, thank you, Councillor Hook has moved the motion and Councillor Fuller has seconded the motion. Councillor Hook, do you wish to speak to the motion as to the motion?
I just think it's a logical step and it's a good move at this particular time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. We'll have elected member. Thank you, Councillor Luke. You'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question?
Ask a question if I can through you, Mr. Mayor. I know that this is something that's been chuffing along for a long time. We've actually had these fees. It's never been well known amongst the shopkeepers or the that there is such a licence that should be gained. I'm wondering whether we should promote the fact in amongst the business community, especially those who haven't even applied for a licence, that this is the case so that we can potentially get a more fulsome number of people that actually sort of do apply for the licences, and we're more likely to actually sort of get that fulsome uptake if there is no fee. But I think when it is important to have those licences, that we should actually work on it all the time. And I know that there are staff issues in compliance of this sort, but I think this is a good news story for the business community and we should promote it widely.
Thank you, Councillor Luke. Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion. Wish to speak to the motion?
Just a question for Mr. Johns. The ones, has anyone paid that? I would think there might be a couple that would have paid that money, or have they not paid it yet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not 100% sure. Councillor Fuller, I have to take that on notice. Thank you. But if they had paid it in the, I guess the start of the financial year, I would imagine it'd be better to come back now if this resolution gets up.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions, councillors or elected member who'd like to speak against this motion before I put the motion? In the case, I'll put the motion. All in favour? I'll call that unanimously supported. I'll now move forward to the next item, which is item 11.5, development application 2021/073, construction of detached.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I think there was a staff member wanting to make a comment. I think Wade had his hand up.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Swain. We've moved on to the motion, and if there are further clarification, we'll do that after the council meeting. I'll hand back to Mr. Johns now to detail the recommendation in that item. Thank you, councillors.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, councillors. This report seeks resolution of council to approve a DA for the construction of a shed and retaining wall at 18 Vera Close in Gunnedah. This report, council, as it seeks a departure to a couple of standards that is contained within our development control plan. One relates to maximum size of an outbuilding, another one relates to maximum height. There were no objections received from neighbours in our notification process, and in this case the departures are supported for the reasons outlined in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Thank you, Councillor Hasler has moved that motion, and Councillor Fuller has seconded the motion. Councillor Hasler, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I don't.
For elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question? Councillor Fuller is the second of the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thanks, Mr.
In any case, I'll put the motion by show of hands. All in favour? Unanimously supported. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now move on to item number 12, Director of Infrastructure Services reports, and I'll call on Mr. Bartlett to detail his recommendations, starting with item 12.1. Actually, there's one report, the only report from Mr. Bartlett, and that is asset management strategy and system upgrade. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. The purpose of this report is to seek council endorsement to transfer funding currently identified in Year 2 of the delivery program to Year 1 for asset software and development of an asset management strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Now, corporate elected member to move that recommendation. You come to motion.
I'll move it to ask a question, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Hasler, seconded by Councillor Cook, and the floor is yours, Councillor Hasler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps the director might be able to place the first paragraph on page 73. Perhaps you could place that paragraph in layman's terms, please. Give me an explanation of the nexus there. And secondly, the next paragraph, could you give me some, what are the issues referred to in that paragraph, the second paragraph in page 73?
Thank you, Councillor Hasler, for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The first paragraph, the nexus, is essentially the benefit that can be realised with doing both of those processes at the same time, as opposed to having them done as two separate processes. There's some quite significant benefits to doing that. And in terms of the second part, the primary issues are around the intensiveness of the workload required in order to do that under the current system, and the fact that we're operating with two separate systems, one for financial management and one for asset management. Having the system being able to better integrate reduces the staff input required, and it also improves the quality of the information.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
And what we've referred to in the next paragraph? The issues there that are being...
that was what I answered in the second part, Councillor Hasler. So the issues essentially relate to the amount of work and to verify the data between the two systems.
On that basis, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to support my motion.
Now call on elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask a question. Councillor Hook is a second on the motion. Wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Being the case, I'll put the motion by show of hands. All in favour? Unanimously supported. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Item 13 is reports to committees. We have one report, which is Planning, Environment and Development Committee meeting report. It was held on the 1st of August. We have a recommendation. It reads that Council notes that all items of the Planning, Environment and Department Committee meeting held on the 1st of September 2021 were dealt with by the committee within its delegated powers. I call on elected member to move that. Thank you, Councillor Moses, seconded by Councillor Campbell. Councillor Moses, wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Speaks for himself.
Elected member who'd like to speak against the motion or ask the question? Councillor Campbell, second the motion, wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Be the case, put the motion by show of hands. All in favour? Unanimously supported once again. Thank you. Item 14, delegates reports. There are no delegates reports because we're in COVID. No one can travel anywhere. We'll move on to item number 15, which is notice of motion or questions on notice. We've received one for the council meeting, and that is from Councillor Fuller. And that question on notice reads, could the Director of Infrastructure Services provide a report to council outlining what work is proposed to address the serious traffic issues in View Street highlighted by local residents, and provide a time frame for the works to be completed? Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. A road safety audit was undertaken in August 2020. This road safety audit was also reported to the local area traffic committee in November 2020. To address the risk identified in that road safety audit, the following works were identified: replacement replacement of the existing handrail with bollards and connected by chains, replacement of the tram ramps and installation of central refuge islands, review of the existing signage as required, rationalisation of the line marking, including adjustment of the light lane. It was committed that these works would be scheduled to commence in the first quarter of this financial year, and the works team are still on track to commence that work on site as committed.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Councillors, will now be moving forward on to a late report to close. So I'll request that we have elected member please move the motion that we move into a closed meeting. Thank you, Councillor Hook, and seconded by Councillor Swain. I'll put that motion. All in favour? By show of hands, all in favour? Councillor Hasley, you voting? Are you against? Are you voting? You let me know. Back into resumption of standing orders. Ms. Markey?
Yes.
Thank you, councillors and executive team. We've now resumed standing orders, and I'd like to read out the resolution of closed meeting of council, and that reads in two parts. That council authorise the general manager to negotiate the acquisition of property as detailed in the report, and two, should it be successful in negotiating an agreed purchase price for the property, receive a further report from the general manager for the purpose and classification of the land. Councillors, that is the resolution of the last item on our agenda, and it gives me great pleasure to thank you all for this hybrid version, your patience in delivering of this very important September ordinary meeting of council. I'd like to declare the meeting closed at 5:31, and thank you for your attention.